talkSPORT.
Hawksbee and Jacobs here on talkSPORT, and the debate rages on over whether sport should return with artificial sound effects on the coverage. And I think in American sport, they seem very, very keen on it. I haven't heard stuff that's gone on in the Far East. They seem quite keen. We know, of course, in the Bundesliga, they have kept the feed clean. There's no effects on it. And
Joe Root, did you hear that? Joe Root wants Barmy Army songs played in during the test matches.
Really? That is interesting. So with people liking it and others quite happy with the way things are, we thought we would turn to the science. And luckily, Professor Glenn Cummins from Texas Tech has studied the effects of crowd noise on sports viewing extensively. And we're delighted to say he joins us now. Glenn, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you guys?
Yeah, we're good, thank you. Appreciate you joining us. What has your research found then in terms of as a viewing experience? How much difference does it make, kind of the effect of the crowd noise?
Well, it's interesting because I've read so much coverage and obviously the debate you talked about in terms of how people respond to this. And I've seen so many people anecdotally refer to this as an experiment, and that's quite literally what we did. Is we, in a research setting, in a research lab, we had people come in and listen to brief segments of football matches, and in some of the matches they were listening to the original audio with the natural crowd noise. But then in some of the segments they listened to what I call a sweetened version of it, where we simply augmented that crowd noise just a little bit, maybe adding some extra cheers in different places, that sort of thing. So again, it was we worked to follow the natural pace of the game. We worked to try and mimic what was happening there on the field. But we found that the people in our lab, they responded and they followed that artificial crowd noise. So when they heard the artificial cheers inserted into the game, when they heard the heightened pitch of the crowd, they responded and they rated those clips of the game as more exciting. They rated those parts of the game as more competitive. So I think, again, that's a very strong testament to just how much we follow social cues. We listen to those around us, and again, they have such an influence on our own perception and our own behavior.
This work that you did you do this before COVID-19, or have you done this since, in anticipation that sport will come back behind closed doors?
No, it's funny. We actually did this probably about 2 years ago, and when I was doing these studies, I never dreamed. I never dreamed that we would be in the current state that we are right now. Really, my interests fall in looking at the process of producing sports. I'm always so interested in all the behind-the-scenes personnel that you see, either camera people, technical producers. All the army of people that work, in trucks off-site at the stadium, who are involved in making this thing that we see on our screen. So that's really what my research interests lie. And, we pay so much attention to camera shots and replays and slow motion. But I think sound and crowd noise is such a big part of how we perceive and respond to the competition. And I don't think we give as much focus to sound, especially not until now with obvious recent events. And so that was really the motivation for my study a few years back, was just paying a bit more attention to something that is pervasive, that it's always there, but we just simply don't think about. We take it for granted because it is always there.
It's interesting. I was all for kind of artificially sweetening the coverage if it was well choreographed, and which I thought it could have been if you got the right people to do it and to get the right kind of peaks and troughs in the way that could be done. You could stage manage it like anything else, I think. But having watched the Bundesliga football now, Glenn, it becomes a different experience. You can hear all the shouts of the players. You can hear the coaches. You can often hear snatches of conversation with the officials, and it becomes a very different viewing experience and a bit more intimate. So I think quite a lot of us have kind of come round to quite liking that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, and really, I think the world that we're eventually going to enter into is the day and age where technology lets us basically create our own tailored version of broadcasts we want to hear. And the technology is certainly there right now. So I could easily imagine a scenario where you, as the audience member, get to pick whichever feed you want. And again, because I think the truth is, some people are going to like the artificial crowd noise. Some people aren't. When we talk about sports fans, we've got to remember that they are not just a homogenous unit, that, there are lots of different types of sports fans who want very different things from their broadcast. So I think, we're eventually going to enter a day and age where people are going to be able to create their own custom tailored broadcasts. And that might include, the audio aspects of what they're seeing and hearing. But I could also imagine, visual aspects. Some people, complain about graphics that appear on screen. Some people want just a wide shot of the competition with fewer cutaways. So again, I think we're entering an age of technology where it's going to be very fascinating to see moving forward how people use technology and how broadcasters provide portals and platforms where people can engage in this type of customization.
We've often talked over the years about the sound of sport being the final frontier of TV coverage. We see so much in way of cameras and camera coverage, but you very rarely hear the locker room chat, the timeout chat, which we're hearing in things like The Last Dance for the first time, hearing Phil Jackson talking to Jordan and Jordan talking back to him. And it is a fascinating aspect of it. So that, as Paul says, we will be able to hear some of that when football comes back, or when sport comes back without crowds.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think, again, it speaks to the very different modes of viewing and modes of consumption that people do. Because some people, again, very like that intimacy, very much so like hearing the players and hearing the grunts of the athletes on the field and that sort of thing. But then you've also got to imagine there are plenty of viewing scenarios where you may be in a crowded room or at a pub with some friends. And frankly, what you're hearing on screen is such a small part of that viewing experience. I mean, you're paying attention, or you're having a beer with a friend, and the crowd noise is really just the cue that reminds you, oh, I need to turn and pay attention to what's happening. Something exciting is going on. So in that kind of scenario, you may not hear very much of the broadcast at all because you're simply paying attention to your friends and what's going on around you. So again, I just think it speaks to all the different viewing environments that we find ourselves in. But nonetheless, I do think that crowd noise is perhaps the most important, the most pervasive part of that broadcast, because that is what reminds us to have heightened focus on the competition. When we hear the crowd start to swell, we hear that roar. That's telling us, hey, there's something going on we need to pay attention to. We need to put down our phones. We need to put down our tablets and really focus on the game.
Yeah, that's very true. That's another way. Of course, we consume sport with about 3 or 4 devices going on, apart from the TV. But good to talk to you, Glenn. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Professor Glenn Cummins there, Texas Tech, and